So we're going to be in Genesis chapter 29. Genesis chapter 29 is the story of Jacob ending up at the house of Laban, and there he's going to meet his wives, and it's wise because he fell in love with one and got tricked to marry the other. And I'm going to go over that narrative with you. And I would entitle this lesson that the trickster got tricked. But the Genesis chapter 28 is an interesting text because it is when Jacob has a dream at Bethany. And it is a famous story because it is this dream that Jacob has that the angel visits him to give him a vision for the future, that God is going to bless all the people of the earth through his offspring. And that is in verse number 14 of Genesis chapter 28. And God is still keeping his promise to Abraham through Isaac and now through Jacob. And that is typical of God, that he keeps his promises. And a lot of things have happened, and God has not kept his promise, because we look at Sarah and Abraham. I mean, look at all the mistakes that have happened before we got to this point where God's going to reassure Jacob of the promise that he gave to Abraham. God going to fulfill that promise. We look at Abram lied about Sarah being his wife. We look at Sarah helping God out by recommending that Hagar go in and be a surrogate for her and sleep with her husband. We see how she mistreated Hagar, and we see all of these mistakes in that relationship. And then Isaac is born, and we see a sacrifice made, but God provides a ram in the bush. And then the story of Isaac and Rebekah tricking her husband and denying her son Esau his blessing, and how Jacob is a part of that. And none of this cancels out the promises of God. And God is going to reassure Jacob that his promises are sure. And you're going to see that. You start in verse 13, chapter 28. And there above stood the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. And I will give you and your descendants the land on which you lie. And your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread to the west and to the east, north and south, and all the people of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. God keeping his promises. Now, when I was preaching this idea of God keeping his promises at Pilgrim Grove Sunday, I really came to a point where I understand who God is. God always keeps his promises, and our mistakes never cancel out God's promises. If God said something, God's going to keep his promises. God's going to keep his commitments to us, and our mistakes don't cancel out God keeping his promises. And I really love that fact because it reassures me that God's plan is going to be carried out in my life. When I first came here to this church, Shalom, anybody remember one of my first sermons that I preached? One of my favorite verses that I preach it often now because it's one of my favorite verses. And it was one of my first sermons, Philippians 1:6. You remember I preached that sermon, he who has begun a great work in you will complete that work until the day of Jesus Christ. I believe that, and I stand on that God completes any work that he starts in us and through us. Whatever promises God makes to us, God keeps those promises, and you yourself, me, myself, cannot get in the way of God keeping his promises and continuing the work in us that he started through us. And we're going to see that demonstrated in this text, because we see how God already had told what would happen with the two sons, Esau and Jacob, that the older would serve the younger. God was going to do that. We don't know how God was going to do that, but Rebekah and Jacob tried to help God out, like Rebekah and Jacob was going to get in this thing and try to help God out. And they they accomplished in getting what God was going to give them freely and willingly. They done it through trickery. And it still didn't cancel out what God's going to do. Now God reassures Jacob that I still got a plan, I still made a promises, and I'm going to keep that promise. And so we see that. And then Jacob made a vow, if the Lord, verse 20 of chapter 28, and then Jacob made a vow, if the Lord will be with me and will watch over me on my journey, I am talking, and I will give food and clothes to eat and to wear, and I will return safely to my father's household, and then the Lord will be my God. And he built like this altar or this pillow and there at Bethany, and he gave a tenth, or I will give a tenth. And you know, that concept of Abraham doing that. People talk about tithing in the Bible. It's in there. Abraham did it, and so did Jacob do it. It was a tenth that they gave. And then we see him arriving at Laban's house. And this is going to be very interesting, because this story is so loaded with drama. I mean, you don't have to watch the Days of Our Lives and all these Tyler Perry shows to see drama. This is drama. So much drama that you really don't even have to put any imagination or exaggeration on the text, because it's enough in there already. And I really want to share this with you. When Jacob saw Rachel, he immediately was stricken by her beauty. And he automatically knew that was the woman he wanted. And you can say it was love at first sight if you want it, that's fine. But he really had an affection and a love, or this kind of desire for her. Now look at what verse 16 says. Now this is really going to describe the two daughters. Now y'all see that? Now listen, I didn't say this. Now look, I didn't say this. This is what the books say. Now Laban had two daughters. Y'all see that? The older was Leah. Y'all see that? The younger was Rachel. Now look, this is what the verse says. Now I didn't say this. Now I don't know what your translations say. But she was weak. This is how some scholars translate. Listen what it says here. Leah had weak eyes. Now you can translate that however you want to, that she was cross-eyed. That's what some scholars say. That she was cross-eyed. Weak eyes, she was cross-eyed. maybe had teeth wasn't aligned perfect, and she didn't have a figure 8 figure. She was not an attractive woman. And some scholars believe the writer is telling us that she was not a very attractive woman. You see what I'm saying? But she was not a woman that visually Jacob was attracted to when he saw her. Now I'm going to teach you some stuff. And we got a young student here. Now y'all sisters, older, seasoned women, agree or disagree. Women love by what they feel. Men love by what they see. Men are visual, women are emotional. Men are attracted by what they see, women by how they feel. That's why men are not moved if you send them roses, but women are. They feel something because they are emotional. Men are visual. This is a perfect demonstration and illustration of that, because Jacob had no physical attraction to this older sister who was not a very attractive woman, possibly cross-eyed, possibly all of her teeth weren't aligned, and possibly she was not a very well-shaped woman for that particular culture. You see that? But look how it describes Rachel. The first thing it says, a lovely figure. I just proved my point. Now, Moses is writing this. The story is being told, or the narrator is telling us that her figure was the most striking thing about her. And she was beautiful visually. And so she would automatically get the attention, even though she was herding sheep, watering sheep. She was out there doing hard labor. It did not take away from her beauty. When Jacob saw her, he was automatically attracted to her because of how she looked, because of her figure. You gotta understand, they didn't dress like women dress today, scantily clad. They were Middle Eastern people. They wore a lot of clothes to protect their skin from the sun. They wore loose clothes, mainly linen, and these were people of a Middle Eastern culture. But this particular woman, Rachel, was a beautiful woman. Her sister had weak eyes. And look what the text says, verse 18. Jacob was in love with Rachel. Now, I don't want to give too much imagination, but you got to see that he immediately, and some scholars would say he immediately fell in love with her. He was immediately enamored with her beauty. He was immediately stricken by her presence. And you could see why, because of how the Bible describes her. She had a figure that sure enough paid attention. You know that song, Brick House? Y'all, some of y'all old school. Her body measurements was perfect in every dimension. Her figure sure enough commanded attention. Oh, y'all, you don't know about that. But I'm telling you, that's the Brick House song. Y'all remember that? She was a brick house. And her presence sure enough commanded attention. And so Jacob was in love with Rachel. He loved her, love at first sight. He was visually attracted to her. He immediately focused his attention on her, and he had to have her. And Jacob, verse 18, was in love with her, or with Rachel, and said, I'll work 7 years in return for your younger daughter. So he wanted to marry Laban's younger daughter, which was Rachel. Verse 19, Laban said, it's better that I give her to you more than some other man. Stay here with me. And so he really wanted Jacob to have Rachel. And so he had to stay there because Jacob said, this is what I'm willing to do to get what I want, the woman I want. I'm willing to work 7 years for free labor, just to get the woman I love. Now, I really wanted to give relationship advice when I taught this tonight, because we have a audience bigger than y'all sitting in here. But I want to say this, the man was willing to work for what he wanted. Put in 7 years of hard labor. And you know men ain't willing to do that today. First of all, they ain't even willing to work. Nevertheless, work for a woman, they ain't even willing to work. And I ain't gonna be hard on all men, but there's some men ain't even willing to work. Nevertheless, work to get what they want, which Jacob was willing to work, put in hard labor to get what he wanted. You can't even get a date, and he paid for it. He ain't got no car for you to be picked up in. Okay, let me sit down because I done got on my soapbox. Let me teach this. I'm just telling the man was willing to work. And so Laban said, that's a good idea, and it's better for me to give her to you than another man. Stay here with me. And so Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel. 7 years. This man worked to get the woman he loved and the woman that he wanted. But listen, this man was so in love because he saw Rachel while he was working, because he was staying with Laban. He continued to be in her presence, to see her move around the farm or the estate. And this man was so enamored with this woman, but it seemed like only a few days to him. Man, listen, that's love. That making my heart want to jump. I ain't never been in love like that. I ain't never been in love that it seemed like only a few days because of his love for her. That is amazing kind of love. And real love, that's the way it is. I hear couples talk about their relationships, especially if they've been married 20 and 30 and 40 years, that they feel like they've always been together. It's been so close, so good, so real, and such a deep love that it seems like that lifetime they've been married forever. And it didn't seem like it's been, a long time in the sense that it's been hard or difficult. They just have this love, but he loved her so much that the labor and the time he spent working for her only felt like a few days. I mean, you got to understand the tension in the text, or the drama in the text, or the remedy in the text is that he got to still be in her presence, around her, seeing her. That was motivation for him to really work when he saw her, and she probably grew more beautiful. They had more conversations, and he knew that one day they would be husband and wife. And so that motivated him to work, and it made the time pass quickly because he was proximity, close to her, got to see her, and still had conversation. And so those 7 years only seemed like a few days. And then Jacob said, verse 21 to Laban, give me my wife. And he was probably pulling them pages off that calendar. And when that 7th year arrived, in the end of that 7 years, that last month, he like, whoo, I got 1 more month to go. And that last week came, he said, I got 7 more days to go. And that 7 days, that last day came, he said, 1 more day. And I'm going to have my boo. And I'm going to get to marry the woman I love that I've worked 7 years for. And he went to Laban and said, give me my wife. The time is complete. I ain't going to put too much emphasis on this, because y'all want to stay right. Because you know what it says. What any man would say after working 7 years for a woman that he loved, that he has watched and couldn't touch. He says, I want to make love to her. Everybody know what that means. I ain't got to go all hard and stuff and explain to y'all. But he was ready to consummate the marriage. He had been able to see her for 7 years. He has been able to be in her presence, see her working on the estate, going in and out of the house, carrying out her domestic duties, and not able to touch her, because in that culture, there was respect for the traditions of marriage. And in a sense, they were engaged in a sense because she was already committed to Jacob. But in that day, you stayed and you built a room on the father's house, preparing for your eventual marriage. And so he was able to see her, but he couldn't touch her. And so Laban, verse 22, brought all the people of the place and gave a feast or a party or a celebration. But when night came, boy, I tell you, low down. But that's what he get. He tricked his brother. Now the trickster is about to get tricked. Life has some karma, if that's what you want to call it. Now, I'm not going to put too much karma in the text, because I can say that the sovereign God of the universe has a sense of humor. I'm not saying that God caused this, but God possibly allowed this, because Laban really was acting based on tradition, because it was tradition that the older girl gets married first. It's just like the older son gets the blessing in the story of Esau and Jacob. It was very traditional culture. And so it was the tradition that the older girl gets married first. You give away her first. And so Laban was really doing what his culture demanded. But he could not get Jacob to marry the girl legitimately. First of all, because she wasn't attractive. That's not who he wanted. He wanted the younger, which was Rachel, who was the prettier girl. But we finna see this story unfold and the trickery that's going to be played on Jacob. But verse 23, but when evening came, he took Leah, brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. Now, how did that happen? One girl is not attracted, the other one is. One had a very lively figure or was very fine and attractive. Laban gave Zillah to his daughter as her attendant. So Jacob got both Leah and her attendant, and Laban gave Leah, Zillah. Uh, and so this is an interesting story because now this fella got what he didn't sign up for. We are in Genesis chapter 29, and we are talking about when the trickster gets tricked, because now he finna get tricked into marrying a woman that he didn't want. Genesis 29, he gets tricked into marrying a woman that he didn't want, and the woman that he was tricked into marrying, she wasn't fine. And I want you to go back, since y'all come in, I'm gonna just do a quick review because I'm gonna really lay down on this lesson here. Verse 26 says that there was two sisters. Verse 16 of chapter 28 or 29, one was fine, the other was ugly. I didn't call her ugly, the book called her ugly. The book said that she was weak, she had weak eyes, and Brother Harris, we believe that she was cross-eyed. Her teeth wasn't that straight, and she wasn't built right. She was probably big back. She was not a very attractive woman, but Rachel is described as having a lovely figure, and she was very beautiful. That's verse 16. Now we fast forward to the story that Jacob fell in love with Rachel and told Laban he'll work 7 years for free in order to marry the youngest daughter, the pretty one that he loved. Now we are in this text where he has worked those 7 years. In verse 21, he goes to Laban and says, give me my wife. The time is complete. I want to make love to her. Because marriages weren't complete, even though they went through the engagement, the wedding, and the ceremony, but it wasn't complete until the marriage was consummated. And I could get into that, but I don't want to get too detailed in it. That whenever a Jewish man would get married, the father-in-law would give him, Dorothy, a white blanket. And on the night of that wedding, the man that he gave it to would spread that blanket under his bride, and then he would make love to her. He would break the hymen, she would bleed, ensuring that she's a virgin. Because if there was no blood on that white blanket, that garment, the marriage was annulled. Because the chastity of a young woman was important in that culture, and the marriage could be annulled if there was no blood on that blanket. You get what I'm saying? And so that was important. And so this marriage thing was serious in this particular culture. So he wanted to consummate the marriage, and the marriage was not completely legal until the marriage was consummated. But Laban tricked him. In verse 22, but when evening came, he took Leah and brought her in to Jacob. Jacob made love to her. Y'all see me? I'm in verse 23. And once he consummated that marriage, it was even though he wasn't engaged to her, even though there was no wedding, even though there was no proposal, even though there was no engagement, once he made love to her, that marriage was official and legal. Because if you took her virginity, you were married. And so when morning came, there was Leah. And so Jacob said to Laban, what is this you've done to me? Now, he's not heard that before from his brother Esau? Low down. Now, he's surprised that Laban done tricked him. His brother comes in with his stew to give to his father to receive the blessing. Now, he done tricked Esau out of his blessing. Now, he's surprised that Laban done tricked him to marry the older girl. What is this you've done to me? I've served for Rachel. Why did you deceive me? Now, ain't that something? He's surprised that somebody done tricked him after he done tricked his brother, him and his mom. Now, I want to teach you a little lesson here. Be careful. Now, did God have a sense of humor and let this happen? I think Laban did it because he really wanted his oldest daughter to get married because that was tradition of the culture. And he tricked after he had worked 7 years for this woman. And you're going to figure out how he done it. He got him drunk. And he didn't know, and then they wore a veil. That's where we get the veil from Jewish culture or older culture. They wore a thick veil, the wedding garment. And so she went in the tent, and he thought it was Rachel. They didn't say nothing. She went in the tent with a veil on. He probably was a little intoxicated, a little inebriated, so he didn't know. And he was so in a hurry to consummate the marriage. We know that because what it says in verse 21. You see that, Dorothy? He was such in a hurry, and he probably wasn't, thinking, you have deceived me. And Laban said, here it is. It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older. Did I not tell you? That God has a sense of humor. God didn't cause it, but it was Laban reacting to the traditions of the culture. The older girl is supposed to get married first, then the younger girl. And he tells him, you came here, I know what you said, I know what you agreed to, I know what we agreed to, but the custom is that the older girl gets married first, then the younger girl. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Man, he had to spend a whole week with this woman plus 7 more years. The week is going to be rough enough. You already got somebody you don't want. If she cross-eyed, he got to look at it, don't know which eye looking at. You see what I'm saying? So, because this wedding, this celebration lasted a week, Jackie. Now, can you imagine? It's a viral video going around of a Nigerian little boy or man who got a big old forehead. And he kind of like short, and he because he got money. You seen that video? And the bride looks so miserable. Yeah, you seen that one? The bride looks so miserable. Like, oh my God, I done married this little deformed head little boy, and this is what I got to have the rest of my life. Imagine the misery that Jacob had to sit there and endure a week of, this lasted a week. See, that's why they ran out of wine at the wedding feast of Cana, because the wedding lasted almost a week. That tradition was kept in Jewish culture even in the day of Jesus. And so this was a week's celebration. Then also, then will I give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years. So he didn't work 7 years to get Rachel. He worked 14 years. I don't care what you say. I can give dramatic tension. This is imagination in preaching. Okay, he done married a woman that he didn't want. She cross-eyed, some believe, not very shapely. Teeth wasn't probably straight, if she wasn't snaggled to. So he got to be married to her for 7 years and still look at the woman that he loved every day. She had to look at him going in and out with her sister. Can you see you don't have to watch Tyler Perry to see drama and tension. These two sisters, and Rachel was in love with Jacob like Jacob was in love with Rachel. Now her sister is married to the man she loves, and he is married to the woman he don't love, but still have to look at the woman that he do love and know that he cannot marry her for another 7 years. Look, and Jacob did so. I think I'd have just took the ugly one and left. Like, forget this. He might, I'm done. Come on, girl. Just tell me which eye you looking at me with. I'm out of here. You see what I'm saying? And so he did so according to verse 28. He finished the week with Leah. And then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife, and also gave her a servant Bilhah. And Jacob loved Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. Imagine the tension in that house. Two wives who has two servants, and both women living with the same man, and that man loved the younger sister more than the older sister. Now, the woman you love is the woman you're going to have more attention, going to give more attention to. Now, imagine the tension in that house. He get up in the morning to go out on the estate to herd sheep and feed sheep and raise sheep, and he wake up and look at Leah and be like, oh, Lord, don't even speak. And see Rachel be grinning, hey, sugar. And Leah be like, you ain't gonna speak to me, honey? I'm just telling you, this is drama at its highest level. And the text admits that he loved Rachel more than he loved Leah. He worked seven more years for Laban. Man, I tell you, God says to him, y'all see what the next verse say? Y'all think I'll be making this thing? You see what the next verse say? God got a sense of humor. God is behind the scenes. Now he's going to come from behind the curtain to get involved, because he see how Jacob is treating this woman. God ain't going to stand for it. And when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, God knew how to shake things up. Because the thing was to give your husband children, preferably sons. And God decided to get involved because, then listen, this is another lesson that God will not let you be victimized and not come to your rescue, especially when you get put in an unfair situation, because Leah didn't sign up for this. She didn't sign up for this. Her father got her involved, like Jacob's mama Rebecca got him involved in their mess. I want you to see the tension in the text. It was Rebecca that got Jacob involved in her mess to steal the blessing from Isaac. It was Laban that got Leah involved in his mess to trick Jacob. God takes care of innocent victims. Leah ain't got to worry about being mistreated by Rachel and Jacob. God got her back. Just like God had the back of Ishmael and Hagar. Look at what happens. And when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive. But Rachel remained childless. And verse 32, Jacob, I don't care what you say. The tension in the text, if you put your imagination and put real life experience, a man is going to look at a woman different who produces him a child, especially a son. Ain't the truth what I'm saying? I don't care how you feel about it. Because that's what he remembers the promise God made him in chapter 28. Now he sees God fulfilling that promise. He's going to start having children and a son. She started looking pretty to him all of a sudden, Dorothy. I'm just telling you because, I mean, that would be the normal reaction. Leah became pregnant, gave him a son, and named him Reuben. And she said, because the Lord has seen my misery. Because she saw Reuben as a blessing because her life had been so miserable. Imagine a man waking up on the wedding night after making love to you like, ugh, oh, Lord, have mercy. What is this? Who is this? Can you imagine the pain, the hurt feelings? And then him sitting at her wedding celebration for a week and really not even looking at her, not wanting to really pay attention to her. And then knowing that he's looking at your sister every day with affection, smiles. And she's in a miserable, I didn't say this, she said it. My life been miserable. Do you see that in the text? She had a miserable life. And the Lord has seen my misery. And surely my husband will love me. Love me now. And I'm telling you, I'm giving you human emotion. He changed his feelings about her. Was probably overcome how she looked and the fact that he was stricken to marry her. Now she is producing children, a son. That changes everything. And she conceived again and gave birth to a son. Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he has gave me this one too. And she named him Simeon. Now she's describing her life, and that's really what I want to talk about. She says, I'm not loved, and I'm miserable. Brother Harris, you don't want to be with no woman who's miserable and don't feel love. Matter of fact, one of my favorite verses in Proverbs said, it's better to live in a house with a tin roof and a leaking roof than to live in a house with an unhappy woman. Can you imagine? This woman is telling us by the names of her sons, the hell she's lived in. We know for at least 14 years, because 7 years, and as time has passed, 7 years for sure, in the house with a man that don't love her, with a sister that probably treated her with indifference, and so she's miserable and she doesn't feel love. She can't be loved by her husband, and she's probably despised by her sister, and she's looked down upon, and she names her sons based upon, but now listen, it's going to change. So these are the first two sons, Reuben and Simeon. And again, she conceives. I'm still in the text. Again, she conceives, verse 34, and gave birth to a son and said, now at least my husband will become attached to me because I have bore him 3 sons. And so he will be named Levi. Now I want to say this because I want to inject something in the text because there is also implications in the text. I'm saying what I'm saying, that it should have made the affection of Jacob grow for his wife. But based on what she's telling us is that it ain't working. That having him children just ain't working. You see what I'm saying? That no matter how many children she's having for this man, it ain't making this man love her anymore. And really connecting with her. I'm throwing this in. Having a baby with a man ain't gonna make him love you. Ain't gonna make him stay. Getting pregnant by somebody who, listen, I've been teaching some lessons that are implied in this lesson of Jacob and his two wives, because it says he loved her. And I was telling them earlier that men are attracted by what they see, women are attracted by how they feel. Men are visual and women are emotional. This is some relationships, good stuff. A woman wears something, click with a man. A man say something, it click with a woman. Close your ears. Put your finger in your ear. I tell men all the time, you start making love to your wife from the time she wake up in the morning, and how her day goes is going to determine how your night goes. If you don't flirt and make that woman feel something, you ain't gonna have a good night. Ain't the truth what I'm saying? You can't talk to that woman crazy, insult her and call her out of her name and expect her to all of a sudden be ready. She listening, and it makes you feel something. You want a good night, let her have a good day. Start the day off by flirting, send her some roses, compliment her, and flirt with her. Tell her, girl, you woke up, you were fine, you look good with that uniform on. Woo! And that's going to excite her because she's emotional, she's hearing, and it makes her feel something. She's going to do something, and he going to see something, be like, whoo, because I'm just explaining it to you. You can undo your ears. I'm trying to explain something to you. That no matter how many children, it is implied in the text that the first child didn't make him feel any different toward her. The second child didn't make him feel any different toward her. And she said, look what it says in the text. Now at least, or now last, my husband might become attached to me, because I bore him 3 sons, and so he was named Levi. Still, I don't feel like the text might be implying she wasn't getting what she wanted. Having babies ain't gonna get a man. Having babies ain't gonna keep a man. Having babies can't trap a man. Because verse 35 says, and she conceived again. And when she gave birth, she said, this time, I'm just going to praise the Lord. I'm going to focus on giving God praise for changing my situation and my circumstance. She finally got it out of her system. There's nothing she was going to be able to do to change Jacob's feelings about her. So by the 4th child, she finally realized, I'm going to start praising the Lord. This ain't got nothing to do with Jacob. I'm fulfilling my wife's responsibilities, having him children, and he still don't appreciate me. I'm putting a little bit spin on the text. So she said, forget him. I'm going to start focusing my attention on the Lord. Praise the Lord. And so she named him Judah. You see that in the text? For the first 3, she was focusing on trying to change Jacob's image of her, trying to develop a relationship with Jacob by having him child after child, and nothing was working. And so she finally, after the 4th one, said, I will praise the Lord. She changed her focus. And then she said, I'm going to stop having children. Then she stopped having children. You see that? Well, I want to say something, but I can't because I don't want them to murder me on Facebook. but at some point, you got to start thinking about you. I mean, at some point, you see that it's not producing the results you want. At some point, you got to change strategy and change your focus. You get what I'm saying? Huh? It's a distraction. And it doesn't yield the results. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always have what you've always had. If you want what you never had, you got to do what you never done. You got to change. She finally realized, I'm going to start praising the Lord. The Lord is doing this for me. And the Lord must have a reason for me having this man, this many children. And so I've been trying to make my husband happy, and I'm glad the Lord blessed me to do this. First of all, he dealt with my misery. Secondly, he started dealing with, because I didn't feel loved. And thirdly, I thought it was going to help my husband be more attached to me, but none of that worked. So now, this fourth one, I'm going to start praising the Lord. Give God his proper praise and credit. And when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, up in the clothes, she became jealous. Ain't God got a sense of humor? Not the one that wasn't getting love became jealous, but the one that was getting all the love and the attention. Ain't that something? And her womb was shut up and barren. And now she sees Jacob enjoying the children with a woman that he really didn't love, really didn't want, and really didn't give her the proper level of affection. But because she was having these children, she saw this relationship grow and become strengthened because of these children. Now she's sitting there with no children. Hey, Rachel, we'll be back. Where y'all going? Me and Leah and the boys going to the park. They have a family fun day. So she probably felt some kind of way, like, she's left out. And so the text says she becomes jealous of her sister. And she said to Jacob, give me children or I will die. This ain't got nothing to do with Jacob, because I'm pretty sure, and I have a sneaky suspicion, y'all spent a lot of time in the bedroom with the woman that he loved that had the very lively figure. This had to do with God. You see what I'm saying? So she's telling Jacob, you ain't doing your job. You need to get on it. Now you're going to have to produce some children. Okay, I'm saying this. It had nothing to do with Jacob, because Jacob had already produced 4. Everything with him was working. She wasn't working. Y'all see that? I got to close. And Jacob became angry with her. Because she done insulted his manhood. You see that? Jacob became angry with her. I'm in a place, the place of God, who has kept you from having children. It ain't me, it's God. Because I done produced 4. It ain't me, it's God. Don't start coming for me. Don't start coming for me questioning my manhood. Whether my boys work, they working. Don't start coming for me. That would be the natural action with any man, wouldn't it? And so she said, here's my... What? You see how these people in the Bible, they twisted, ain't they? You see Sarah giving her servants to Abraham. Now here is Rachel going to do the same thing. But Harris, I don't care what you say. It'd been nice to live back in them days. We ain't gonna not have been terrible. We Christian men, we wouldn't have been a part of that foolishness. We would have said no. And so then she said, here's my servant Bilhah. Sleep with her so she can bear children for me. So I too can build a family through her. And so she gave her servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant. So the problem wasn't him. It was her. You see that in the text? And she became pregnant and bore him a son. And then Rachel said, the Lord has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and gave me a son. And because of this, she named him Dan. You see how God is working? And Rachel's servant Bilhah again conceived and bore a second son. And Rachel says, I have had great struggles with my sister. I have won. She's going to claim a victory. She's going to claim a victory through her servant. And so when Rachel saw that she had stopped having children, and so, when Leah saw that she stopped having children, Leah wasn't finished because she wasn't going to let her sister outdo her. Now, I'm finna close this story and look. You see how this message is finna get? And she like, okay, she done start, okay, here my servant. Y'all ready? Let's take this up. I'm finished. Say, okay, I know this girl, she ain't finna outdo me. And so she said, now here's my servant. Here's my servant, girl. Go in there and lay with her. And he did. And guess what? She started having children. Now, ain't this a messed up household, all this competitive stuff? This is crazy. I'm finished. Look at verse 9. I'm closing when I give you verse 9 and 12. And so Leah stopped having children. She took her servant and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Leah's servant bore a son for Jacob. And Leah says, the Lord give me good fortune. She named him Gad. And Zillah's servant bore Jacob a second son. And Leah says, how happy am I? The women will call me happy. And she named him Asher. And during the wheat harvest, Reuben then was in the field. I'm closing for it because it's going to change a little bit, because the Lord is going to eventually remember Rachel. And Rachel going to have the favorite son. And we're going to get in that next week. So y'all see the lessons here? How God vindicates Leah and how God fixes things and works things out. But the trickster got tricked. Now, the lesson going to get good next week because it's going to launch into this central key figure in the text, which is the 12 sons of Jacob. One son is going to be used by God to save a nation. And how God is going to work through all the mistakes and the missteps of those who he used. And God does that. God doesn't cancel out his promises. Our missteps does not void out God's plans. God still works his plans through all these human instruments that try to help God out and get in God's way. God still carries out his plans. It doesn't void the promises and the plans of God. Y'all still with me? Y'all got any questions? You ain't got no question? He gave me a testimony Sunday. Well, he gave me, boy, that's all right, boy. Because listen, me and you in the same place. How you went in that restaurant, didn't have enough money, and somebody said, here's a little money. That's a testimony. Yeah, he told that. Tell it, boy, because that made me know you were listening to you be listening to the sermon. You don't be asleep. You be looking like it with one eye, barely make it, but you be listening to that word. Huh? Yeah. He wanted to get that. He couldn't wait to get that testimony. And let me know he didn't listen. Y'all got any questions? And so again, we're gonna get into now the story of Joseph is so interesting.